It always begins quietly with the kind of discomfort that's too vague to explain, but too persistent to ignore. She wasn't scared at first, just unsettled. It was the kind of feeling you get when you're sure someone is staring at you, even when you're alone in a locked room. She'd be doing the most mundane things, brushing her teeth, folding laundry, reading late at night, and suddenly she'd freeze, certain there were eyes on her, watching from just beyond her line of vision. The sensation would come in waves, pulsing at the back of her skull, prickling her skin, tightening her chest. Every time she turned around, the room looked normal, but the energy wasn't. Something invisible had shifted. She started glancing over her shoulder more often, her eyes darting to corners, mirrors, windows. Sometimes she'd catch a flicker, a movement in the periphery, but it vanished before her brain could register what it was. Her reflection in the mirror started to feel unfamiliar, almost like it belonged to someone else, like something else was borrowing her face just for a second. That feeling of being observed deepened, evolving from a hunch to a certainty. She began hesitating before walking into dark rooms or passing open doorways. There was no proof, no tangible sign that anything was wrong, but her instincts screamed. Otherwise, even her dog began acting strangely, staring into empty corners, growling at nothing, refusing to enter her bedroom. Her sleep became shallow, restless, her dreams fragmented with glimpses of shadowy figures and rooms that didn't belong to her. But no matter what she did, closing blinds, locking doors, turning on all the lights, that feeling clung to her. Like it had weight, like it followed her from room to room, always just a few steps behind, just beyond the reach of light. It started subtly, the way small things often do before spiraling into something far worse. Her phone began dropping calls in the middle of conversations, but only when she was home. The Wi-Fi would blink out for hours, yet every other device in the apartment complex worked fine. Apps crashed without warning, text messages wouldn't send, and voicemails arrived garbled or out of order. At first, she blamed her service provider, but tech support found nothing wrong. Then she noticed the pattern. Everything failed only when she stepped into her bedroom. The strangest part was that the security camera mounted outside her front door never glitched. It recorded without interruption, always capturing the hallway in crystal clear resolution. But every time she checked the footage from inside the apartment, it showed static or pitch black, like something was blocking the signal. When she tried installing a second camera in her room, it shorted out overnight. The third one disappeared entirely, the mount still screwed into the wall, but the camera gone without a trace. Her laptop began to behave differently too. Files went missing, folders rearranged themselves, and the screen would flicker randomly, especially when she was writing about her experiences. Her voice assistant turned on in the middle of the night, answering questions no one had asked. She unplugged it, only to find it back in place the next morning, plugged in and powered up. Even her TV started changing channels by itself, always, landing on static-filled stations or playing back scenes she didn't remember watching. Every attempt to reach out to friends, to tech support, to anyone was met with dropped connections, frozen video calls, or corrupted audio. She began to feel like she was being cut off, like whatever was watching her was making sure no one could hear her scream every night. Without fail, she woke at exactly 3:17 a.m. No alarm, no sounds, no dreams. Her eyes would snap open as if something had jolted her from sleep, and she would lie there, staring into the darkness, her breath shallow, heart pounding for no reason she could explain. At first, she thought it was stress or insomnia. She tried staying up late to reset her internal clock, but even on nights she forced herself to sleep at dawn, she still woke at that same hour. The pattern became uncheckable, and soon the time 3:17 began to haunt her on clocks, phone screens, even receipts. She once left her phone recording overnight, hoping to catch some sound or movement that would explain her sudden awakenings. When she reviewed the footage, the video played fine until it reached 3:17. Then it skipped, froze, distorted. For those 60 seconds, the screen was consumed by flickering static and a faint, low-frequency hum that made her stomach turn. Every attempt to replay or convert the file failed. It was as if something didn't want that moment to be seen. Some nights, she lay completely still, pretending to be asleep, hoping to catch whatever presence stirred her awake. That's when the breathing began faint at first, then louder. Uneven, wet. It wasn't coming from her. It wasn't even close to her bed. It was beside her, near her head, hovering above the pillow, as if something was crouched there in the dark. Exhaling slowly, watching her pretend not to notice, she couldn't move, couldn't scream. Her body locked itself in a state of silent terror, like it somehow knew that reacting would make it worse. When the breathing stopped, the air felt heavier, like something invisible had decided to linger a little longer than before it. It wasn't just the air that felt strange, it was the temperature, the pressure, the way the walls seemed to breathe. When she wasn't looking, there was one corner of her bedroom that felt undeniably wrong. The air there was colder, denser, and stepping into it made her skin crawl, as though she'd walked through a cobweb she couldn't see. She brought in a thermometer and left it overnight. The next morning, it showed a 15-degree drop in that exact spot. She checked for drafts, leaks, broken vents, anything that could explain it. But there was nothing, just solid walls and silence. Soon, she started hearing things. Soft, deliberate sounds that didn't match the old building's usual creaks and groans. There was scratching slow, rhythmic, and coming from inside her closet. Not the frantic scrambling of a mouse or the shifting of hangers, but a dragging, repeated movement like fingers tracing the inside of the door. She stood frozen one night as the sound continued for nearly 10 minutes, refusing to open the door. When she finally forced herself to check, nothing was there. No marks, no animals. Just an overwhelming smell of something stale and rotting. That vanished moments later. She sealed the closet shut with duct tape, trying to convince herself it was just her imagination. But when she woke the next morning, the door was wide open. The tape had been peeled away cleanly and laid flat on the floor, as though removed with care. Her clothes inside had shifted, nothing was missing, but everything was just slightly out of place, hangers turned the wrong way, shoes lined up too perfectly. That night, as she tried to sleep, she felt something brush against her foot under the blanket, slow and cold and unmistakably real, and the scratching began again from somewhere much closer. It was a Tuesday morning when she found it sitting on her kitchen table like it had always belonged there. A single Polaroid photograph, slightly curled at the edges, its colors washed in that familiar vintage hue. She hadn't owned a Polaroid camera in her life. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The image was of her sound asleep in her bed, taken from above, as if someone had been standing directly over her or had mounted a camera on the ceiling. Her hair was splayed out on the pillow, her hands tucked under her chin in a way that looked too peaceful, too vulnerable. She ran to her bedroom, scanned the ceiling, checked behind furniture, even opened the vents. Nothing. No signs of intrusion, no misplaced objects, no broken locks. She hadn't had guests, hadn't left her windows open, hadn't been anywhere that would make this kind of thing possible. She slept with her bedroom door locked, her phone beside her, and a bat under her bed. None of it had stopped someone or something from getting close enough to take a photo inches from her face while she slept. She checked the timestamps on her devices, looking for gaps in recordings, trying to find something, anything, to explain what had happened. But the footage from the night before was mysteriously corrupted, playing back with jagged lines and warped sounds. There was no evidence of anyone entering or leaving. The Polaroid was the only proof. She took it to a photography shop, hoping to trace its origin. The technician stared at it for a long time before saying the photo paper used had been discontinued for years. The ink had faded in patterns that suggested the photo was older than it should be, like it had been waiting for the right moment to appear.